The base is dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here, October 3rd. It's a Thursday, which means it's Thursday Thoughts. That's the hashtag. You guys can join in on the conversation this morning using that hashtag, tweeting at us at Soccer Down here. Give us your thoughts on things like the U.S. men's national team roster that came out right as we were wrapping up yesterday. No Miles Robinson on it. There's some good things about that. There's some questionable things about that. We'll get into that this morning. We'll get into some updates from around the league ahead of Decision Day. Some players who will be missing out on Decision Day, some players who are expected to be participating on Decision Day, and what that could mean for their postseason futures. There's also a couple of updates about Sunday's expansion priority draft, what that will mean for Miami and Nashville. Also, some updates on what could be happening with the VAR situation in MLS. We'll get into all of that and more on a Thursday edition of SDH. And, John, I'm going to leave it up to you to pick where we start. You go wherever you want to go.
Oh, I guess you want to start with the national team, considering that was once again something that happened right after the show was over.
Yes. I mean, they don't really plan it around us. You do know that, right?
Come on. We're on the air. Give us more stuff to talk about, or at least tease to the following day.
I mean, we're kind of cool, but we're not that cool.
We're way cool.
They're not sitting in Chicago like, let's see. We're going to announce this team. We're going to drop this out there. Let's do it at this time because of Soccer Down Here being on.
I think they should.
Well, I mean, that'd be nice, but I don't think Greg Berhalter and the media team is really thinking about it. Just so you kind of know what's coming up, because this is a new thing, the CONCACAF Nations League. So the U.S. has official matches in this upcoming window. These are not friendlies. This is an official competition. It is new. And this is the first time the U.S. will be playing matches in it. There were matches in the group in the last window in September between Canada and Cuba, but this is where the U.S. will jump into it now. I don't know the ins and outs completely of the UEFA Nations League, but basically the same thing. It's all about dividing them into different leagues within the Confederation. League A is where the United States is, along with Canada and Cuba in Group A. Group B is Panama, Bermuda, Mexico. Group C, Martinique, Trinidad and Tobago, Honduras. Group D, Curacao, Haiti, and Costa Rica. So 12 teams in League A. If you win the group, you go to the semifinals, you get your spot in the 2021 Gold Cup. You finish second in the group, you're going to the 2021 Gold Cup. You finish third in the group, you're getting relegated to League B for the next go-round of the Nations League, and then you go into a second round of Gold Cup qualifying. So you don't get your automatic spot. Canada won both of their games against Cuba in the first set of match days. 6-0 and 1-0. So I think you can pretty much guess that the U.S. should win the group. Canada should be second. Cuba should be third. I don't think the Canadians, John, are giving up on winning this group.
No, and when you have the firepower that you have up top, then you can understand why they would think that way. I know that you've got a keeper who is pretty solid, but your defense is kind of leaky, but you can score goals, or at least you have the names that can score goals. So I could just see them, it's like, all right, pedal down, let's do what we can do, and and chase what we can chase. No, I don't anticipate them just sitting there rolling over at all.
First match of the group, it was Junior Hoylett, who plays for Cardiff City, with a hat trick. One player to really keep an eye on when it comes to Canada is Jonathan David, plays in Belgium. A lot of speed. He's going to be a handful for the U.S. Jonathan Osorio also scored in that match. You know him very well from Toronto FC. Daniil Henry of the Vancouver Whitecaps. That was your 6-0 win in Toronto over Cuba. Then Canada went not to Cuba to play, but Cuba is hosting their matches in the Cayman Islands and won 1-0 on a goal from Alphonso Davies, another player that you know very well from the Vancouver Whitecaps and now Bayern Munich. So, October 11th, United States hosts Cuba at Audi Field in Washington. 6-0 is what Canada did to Cuba. That's kind of your benchmark, I would think. Is that fair?
Oh, I think so. I think that through the transitive property of match organization, I would think that that should be your benchmark going up against that team, sure.
And then October 15th is where you're going to get a good test. You go to Canada, you go to Toronto, and face Canada at BMO Field. I don't think that's an easy match on October 15th.
No, I'm right there with you. And, you know, when you have a motivated side like we know Canada is and will continue to be in this group play, you've got the opportunity to knock off the big dog in the hemisphere. And you're not going to sit there and back down from anything like this. You sit there, and this is the opportunity that you can seize on knocking off the big bad red, white, and blue, and you're going to throw everything that you have at it to see if you can actually pull that off.
And Canada has announced their roster for this match. Let's see, who will stand out to you? I mean, lots of MLS guys like Mark Anthony Kaye, Russell Tybert, Samuel Piette, Jonathan Osorio, who we mentioned, Will Johnson, Kamal Miller, who's had a really good year for Orlando City. He's been a bit of a surprise for me. Richie Larea, we'll see if he stays on his feet. Derek Cornelius of the Vancouver Whitecaps, Maxime Crépeau of the Vancouver Whitecaps in goal. Canada has more players playing overseas in bigger clubs. I think we've seen Canadian players go and play in smaller clubs over the years in Europe. You're starting to get some guys, not just your Alphonso Davies and Junior Hoylett, but you're starting to get some other players that are featuring in clubs with a little bit higher profile. And that's a big step up for Canada.
And when you continue to have that and your game continues to grow and you have all of these folks who are playing with larger clubs overseas, you have a lot of hope for your future when it comes to what you're thinking, not just on a player-by-player basis, but a national scale. And getting these players getting these kinds of reps on that international basis, you know, it means that, at least to me, it means that it's going to add to that level of confidence playing in the international theater. And when you have all these goals and aspirations that you have lined up, getting these reps are key for situations like playing in Toronto, but also playing away from home where you think you can get a result.
6 players aged 22 or younger in this Canadian squad. They are definitely on the rise. And for Canada, this is the first time they've hosted the U.S. in a competitive match since 1998 World Cup qualifying. And it was late in 97. That was the match where the U.S. clinched their qualification for the 1998 World Cup. I believe it was in Vancouver, if I remember correctly. Since then, Canada has not been in the Hex. They haven't been in that type of competition. I think that's why the CONCACAF Nations League can be a good thing for CONCACAF, is you're going to get more competitive games in the Confederation between teams. It's not just going to be in a Gold Cup, which is either a neutral site or it's in the United States, and we'll see if that starts to spread out a little bit more, or it's World Cup qualifying, which will be very different going forward because of the changes to the size of the World Cup, the qualifying process, all of that. Nations League can be a really good thing, I think, for a squad like Canada. For the U.S. and for Mexico and maybe Costa Rica, it's a little bit different conversation, but I think Greg Berhalter has to use this as an opportunity to see both some players like Matt Miazga, DeAndre Yedlin coming back into the group after injury, but also seeing some other young players. And Brendan Aronson is the one who I think got a lot of headlines being part of the squad for the first time.
Yeah, he did. And I was going to ask, when you're looking at Nations League, you have all of these up-and-coming nations with their national teams, and they view it as an opportunity. For the established countries, how much of, in your estimation, how much of a banana peel can Nations League be for the established countries trying to figure things out for that next stage, whether it's roster tweaking or formationally or whatever in a one-off? How much of a banana peel can this be?
Well, it's not a one-off. I mean that.
But I mean, on a game-by-game basis is what I meant. But
you can't think about it that way. You can't. That's not how you do a competition. You're not thinking about just game by game. You've got to qualify. I mean, obviously, you've got to win this group. You've got to get, just like we've said about the Gold Cup, the U.S. should be expected to be in the final at all times. That's the minimum expectation. So to do that, you have to win this group. Do you have to go to Canada and win? No, you can qualify without winning that, but you should. And if you don't, that's going to start to bring up questions, and that's going to start to bring up concerns. That's where you're at with this. That's what makes it hard for a U.S. and for a Mexico and even a Costa Rica in this type of tournament. I mean, Mexico will have to go and play a match in Panama. That's not a simple one. It's their next to last match. They should be in a good spot by then. October 11th will be fascinating to see Mexico go to Bermuda. I mean, that's not one that I think we've ever seen in a competitive match. I don't know if Mexico's ever played in Bermuda. I'm going to assume not. That's an interesting test. And then they get Panama at home. It works out a little easier that they get Panama at the Estadio Azteca first. But they've got to go to Panama. Not easy. Costa Rica has got to go to Haiti, go to Curacao. Not easy. These are good things. Playing in these competitive matches on the road in CONCACAF is a good thing for the heavyweights. It's a test, and it's a test where you have to learn how to play as the favorite. It's not easy. It's not something that you learn in training. It's not something you learn on the book. It's not something you learn in a friendly. I mean, you're going in a competitive match where you've got to get a result on the road in a tough atmosphere. And you take this a step further with this U.S.-Canada match. You've got Josie Altidore and Michael Bradley going to represent the U.S. at Toronto's BMO Field. Yeah, that's an interesting situation for those two.
We've already had a couple folks chime in about this morning on Twitter. And Tafka agrees with me, actually. He says that based on how well SDH is run and the quality of its performances, U.S. soccer in comparison should probably defer to y'all's schedule.
Well, Miles Robinson didn't get called up, so I'm going to assume that quality and consistency of performances might not be something that's being considered. Just saying.
Yeah. And then Daniel Price this morning has come in and already said, is it bad that I want all of this to blow up in Berhalter's and U.S. soccer's face?
Yeah, that's bad. I'm not like that because that's not going to help anything. I was right there with that consistent approach going into 2018, where there was that back of the room conversation about, well, maybe it's a good thing if the U.S. doesn't qualify. Has it been a good thing? Has anything good come of not?
The U.S. not to qualify?
No. We're past it now. We're 2 years past. Has anything good come from the U.S. not qualifying for the 2018 World Cup? Has anything dramatically changed? Are we in a better spot?
Nope.
No, I don't think we're in a worse spot, but we're not in a better spot. Nothing. It wasn't a good thing to miss out on that World Cup. It wouldn't be a good thing if you get embarrassed here and lose to Canada and watch Canada go to the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals. If they beat you in Toronto and they squeak out a draw in the home leg in Orlando in November, that's a bad thing. There's nothing good about that. Because then, I mean, let's play it all the way out. Let's say that is the final straw, even though I don't know if there's been other straws yet, that Greg Berhalter's got to go. All right, then you're starting over from scratch again. Then you're trying to figure it all out again. Then you're trying to figure out who you're going to go hire, how you're going to get them, what they want to do with the program, what they want to do with the player base, how all that goes. I don't think it's a good thing if there's a failure here. I think Berhalter, and the best thing for U.S. soccer is for him to continue to learn and develop and adjust. And I hope he does. And I feel like he has, to a degree. I really do. He's gotten away, I think, from the super complicated version of capital T, capital S, the system, with a trademark at the end.
Yes.
He's gotten away from the super complicated version of it where I'm going to have the right back tuck inside, I'm going to do this, no, just you can still be a possession team, you can still have principles, you can still have philosophies. You don't have to make it that complicated unless you are 100% sure you're ready for it. I mean, are there questions about the roster? There always will be. The
Yes.
Miles Robinson one, look, Miles has 2 caps. I think Miles should be there. I think Miles should get at least a start in this, and the Cuba game would seem to make complete sense to give him a competitive match and get that game. And then if you want to send him back and let him get ready for the playoffs with Atlanta, that's great. You're probably not sending Aaron Long and Walker Zimmerman back to get ready for the playoffs with the Red Bulls and LAFC, so I don't know how happy those clubs are at this point. And it's going to be a tough one going to Toronto and dealing with Canada. So has Miles definitively put himself ahead of Long or Zimmerman? I think he's had a better season, but they've had better careers. So that's a decision that every manager has to make. It comes up for everybody, and it's not an easy one. You go by current form, you go by historical form. You've had those guys in training. You've seen them firsthand and what you want to do. Who fits the system better? Berhalter's made his decision. Now, where that decision gets questioned severely is if there's a big mistake. That's when you get into that level of it. But the roster, I mean, Aronson getting in was a little bit of a surprise for me. No Paxton Pomacall was a surprise.
Yes.
Aronson over Pomacall was a bit of a surprise. Is it catastrophic? No, it's not. It really isn't. But is it a bit of a surprise not to see Pomacall and Robinson? Yeah, I think that's fair. That's okay. And those things are going to happen with rosters that are being picked. Now it's going to be, do you take care of Cuba in a comfortable way? And how do you handle Canada and Toronto? I think that game's getting overlooked as just, playing Canada, whatever, no big deal.
No.
Well, no, we don't know. I mean, John, let's be fair here. When was the last time Canada did anything on the world stage?
1732.
No, 1986 when they went to the World Cup, and 2000 when they won the Gold Cup. Those are both a long time ago, not quite as far back as what you said, but they haven't been there. But this is a better young Canadian team.
Right.
And that's why I feel like the more you overlook this game and the more it's not talked about as a test, the more of a surprise you're going to see when it's not an easy match. And I don't think it's an easy match. And I don't think it's going to be fair if the U.S. wins that 1-0 in a tight game. It's not fair to say that, well, they should have won 5-0. No, they shouldn't. No, I don't think that's the case anymore. It's going to be a tricky one, and it's a game on the road, and I think it will be one of the biggest games that Canada has hosted in a long time. I think the fan base will be really up for that one in Toronto.
To Daniel's point, we see this, and I'm currently going through it, the agita of an alum in college football, where you have your program, and they're not doing well. And
hold on. They're not doing well.
We are awful.
No, I'm talking about the U.S. Not talking about Florida State right now. Okay. Greg Berhalter didn't fail to get this team qualified. Like, let's be a little bit fair to what Greg Berhalter's done. He looked bad in friendlies before the Gold Cup. He got to the final in the Gold Cup. I think you can say that's a solid job done.
Yes.
The loss to Mexico, bad again in a friendly.
Yes.
But you just said you're comparing it to what you're dealing with at Florida State, and you said Florida State's awful. Would you say the U.S. men's national team is awful under Greg Berhalter?
No, but let me finish my point.
Okay, but be fair. That's all I'm asking.
That's right. No, I was building to this, hopefully. When we see this in college football, we have that notion that you've got to blow things up to get better. And a lot of times it's just one thing here or there that will turn the corner for you. So I would ask someone who's looking at this and wants to see something completely and totally go off the rails as you're trying to get back to where you should be on the world stage, just to take it incrementally and understand it for what it is. It's a part of a process. If you do a snap judgment and blow something up all over again, then you end up receding all over again. The cycle starts all over again. Everything goes back, if not even further, because you're losing those years and those cycles of trying to build something and get back to where you were. You risk receding and going back even further and having a rebuild all over again if you want to blow something up and you look forward to something like that happening. That's where my college football analogy was. Sometimes if you sit there and you take a coach and you blow it up, then by the time you've blown it up twice, and 3 times you lose an entire decade of getting something done.
So you want to keep Willie Taggart at Florida State? That's what you're saying?
No. I didn't say that
confused.
Either.
That's why I'm very confused by what you're saying.
I'm just saying that my example, we see it in college football. I'm just saying in college football in general, see what happens with programs. Do I want Willie Taggart at Florida State? No. I thought it was a bad hire. But Greg Berhalter, for me, is not a bad hire. I'm willing to give the patience to see things grow and develop there. If you already pull a snap judgment with someone like a Berhalter, you've recessed again. And I think that's something that is important on the world stage, like U.S. soccer and its place. There needs to be some patience. Do I have questions about what he's done with pulling in guys from the roster? Sure. I've had those questions every single cycle.
What questions on the roster this time around?
Pomacall and Miles, the ones that you've already mentioned. Those were my 2.
But here's my question about it. Would Miles Robinson be a lockdown automatic starter in this group?
Not right now. Okay. In this group right now? No.
Then, would Paxton Pomacall right now, would he be you must start him?
No.
Then how big of a deal is it?
And this is where I think that I think that the U.S. is caught in the in-betweens because you're trying to sit there and win things in the short term, but then develop the younger talent to be there long term. And so that's why I think that you're trying to work 2 separate tracks here at the same time.
Yeah, but
it's a difficult dance.
But no, it's not like older players are keeping Robinson or Pomacall out. They're not. Now, if you want to get into the forward conversation, I will still tell you that I think Josie Altidore is the best forward the United States has right now today. Josh Sargent will be. He will be. He's not right now. Josie right now is the guy. Josie Zardes is a second or third option depending on who's available. Put him to the side. Stop worrying about that one.
Josh learn from Josie Zardes and Josie Altidore, for me, is key to the growth in the future. That's why I'm saying you're working 2 separate tracks here at the same time. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, but let's not overrate how much you're learning in a national team camp for a week. What's better for Miles Robinson if he's not going to be a lockdown starter for the U.S. to prepare for the postseason and train next to Michael Parkhurst and Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez and Jeff Lorenowitz, or train next to Matt Miazga, Tim Ream, Walker Zimmerman, Aaron Long?
The former, no question.
He's not being hurt by that. Pomacall getting a chance first to focus on getting Dallas into the postseason, and then preparing a team that he's one of the leaders in for that at a young age. So I think those two have popped up as huge issues. They're questions. I said yesterday I think Miles Robinson is ready to start, but it's not automatic that he goes over Long or Zimmerman. I think Long right now is who I would put in that spot, but you have Miazga back in the mix as well. So Long, Miazga, Ream, Zimmerman are your 4 center backs here. Robinson can play with all of those guys, and it's very slim margins between all of them. So if Robinson's the odd man out here, it helps Atlanta United. It doesn't do any damage to Miles Robinson. It's a judgment call, and that's why Greg Berhalter is being paid to do what he does. I want to see how he plays. I want to see how this team looks in these games. Is Zach Steffen the automatic, or does Gazan or Johnson have a chance to win the spot? We'll find out. I think it should be an open competition.
Yep.
In the back line, is it Cannon or Yedlin at right back, Lima or Ream at left back, depending on how you're going to play it out? Who are your 2 center backs? It could be any of it. Any of the 8 listed defenders, any of them could play. I have no idea how that's going to look. That's a huge question mark. The midfield, what is it going to look like here? Are you going to go with 3 up top with 2 on either side of Josie Altidore? Are you going to push Sargent into that starting spot? Are you going to manage Altidore's minutes? Maybe you don't start him against Cuba, but start him against Canada. You start Sargent against Cuba. You start Zardes against Cuba. Is it Areola? Is it Morris out wide? I think both of them are possibilities. Do you move Christian Pulisic out into a wide role or play him as a 10? What's the holding midfield look like? Is it Michael Bradley or Will Trapp? And who pairs with them, or are they playing by themselves with McKennie and Pulisic in front, or McKennie and Roldan in front? Does Jackson Ewell get an opportunity? All those questions I just went through from sitting here looking at the roster, that's my number one concern at the moment. There is not an established 11 for a big match. And we're in October of the first year of Greg Berhalter's run, and I don't know exactly how he's going to approach the Canada match. And that's a bit of a problem. And we'll find out. We'll see how it goes, and there will be questions going into it. And if it doesn't go well, there will be some big questions coming out of it. Because if you don't get to the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals, and if you don't win your semifinal and get to the final, it's a failure in this competition. And the U.S. cannot afford failures along the way of getting back to being the top team in CONCACAF. They can't afford that. We're going to find out what Felipe Cardenas thinks about all of that. He's going to join us right after the break. Hang out with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, October 3rd. John's still fired up about Tallahassee and Florida State.
I should be, because we're awful.
See? I told you. Felipe Cardenas just hops into the conversation and goads him along talking about crab legs.
That's right, man.
As
crab
he
legs.
should. As he should.
Oh.
No, for full disclosure.
A stain on that university forever.
You
crab
ain't
legs.
kidding, brother. I do not donate to my alumni association or my athletic association because of the last 7 years. Do not.
See, and that's why.
Times article?
I have not read which New York Times article.
The one that shocked everyone in saying that the local police department showed favoritism toward players when it came to possible arrests and criminal charges. And that the university allegedly showed undue influence in making sure that charges went away. Gee, that never happens.
That was shocking. Did not expect
It was
to see
shocking.
that.
Is Boss Hogg still the police chief in Tallahassee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Up
I
for
think
election
so.
this
That's what I
fall,
thought.
but yes.
Roscoe P. Coltrane is his lead sheriff.
Oh gosh.
But no, we are the college football cautionary tale, and in trying to bring that into a soccer discussion, Felipe, we were getting into that, and it's like, you don't be like Florida State was basically my
but
my
that's
premise.
what I was afraid of, and I wanna get your take on it, Felipe, about the U.S. I guess the fan base and the vibe around this national team right now, because when John started the comparison with Florida State, I thought that's where he was gonna go, was where a lot of the mood is about the U.S. national team right now. Get everybody out and just start fresh, because it's all bad.
Yeah, it is like the vibe of the national team on Twitter is very bad. It's just in social media in general. Anything that has to do with the U.S. men's national team is pretty toxic, and the figurative, dumpster fire. I think we can all agree that that's the perception. But when I was in St. Louis covering the team, I was on counterattack with Dunny and Miola, and they asked me what was the vibe in the camp, and what I said at the time was that it's not the dumpster fire that we see here. There was pressure. I could sense that there was like a pressure coming from not just the players felt it, and not in a negative way. Like I thought they're hearing what's being said. And Greg Berhalter, was coming off the disappointing loss against Mexico, and the way that he addressed reporters after that game. And so when I spoke with Greg Berhalter, before and after the game, I felt like there's some pressure though, but not in a way that they don't know how to handle. And I heard what you said, Jason, and I've said this on several occasions. Greg Berhalter, say what you will about how he wants this team to play, and the roster decisions that he's making, and the way he got this job. Those are all things that are adding to kind of like the environment around the team. But he wasn't the manager when the team failed to qualify for the World Cup, and so he's inheriting that burden as well, and that failure. And so this happens to any country in the world. Okay, guys, and I know you know this, but it's like, and when a team doesn't qualify for the World Cup, that is a monumental failure. When a team that is supposed to go, when a team that's supposed to come out of their region and qualify doesn't qualify, there's no bigger failure. And so recovering from that, what's happening with the U.S. is not uncommon to what we see in other countries. And so when I left St. Louis, I felt like, I know it's difficult for the fans. I even wrote about this, that, it's hard to try to embrace the process that U.S. soccer is trying to incorporate, and that Greg Berhalter is trying to, what he's trying to teach. But that's the reality. The other reality is, there are games coming up that they have to perform well in, that they have to win. They're not friendlies anymore. And so that's where we are.
So when you look at, we were talking about the Canada match in Toronto, and this is not your father's or your older brother's Canada side. This might be your dad's Canada side, but they're not a team with the roster that Jason went through that you can sit there and go, yeah, okay, we got this, no worries and whatever, and especially going into Toronto to do it. So it's something that you've got to be prepared for as a part of the continual growth of where you want to be as a national side.
Yeah, Canada's they're a better team than they have been, in the last decade probably. It's not a golden generation because they have not accomplished anything yet. But even in Canada, they know that it is a very good generation of players that they have right now, and that they need to take advantage of it. I think the similarities between the U.S. and Canada right now, as we stand, it's funny because now they're at this level playing field all of a sudden, which hasn't been that way in a long time. The U.S. has been on like a 16-year streak of going to World Cups. That they can handle Canada. Canada is kind of like the little brother, and now they're at the same level because the rosters are pretty equal as far as talent goes. You could argue that in some areas of the field, Canada has stronger talent. I would say up top, they're pretty strong. And the other similarity is coaching. Two new coaches, young coaches. And an 8-year plan, which I think, going back to why it's difficult for fans to understand this, is that both countries, in my opinion, I know Canada was outright. John Herdman, when I was covering them during the Gold Cup, he was talking about an 8-year plan. The U.S. is not doing that publicly, but I believe the U.S. is also in an 8-year plan to have the strongest possible core of players for 2026 when they host the World Cup. And Canada is looking at, that same route, even though 2022 is a big, target for them. But John Herdman during Gold Cup was very adamant about that this is an 8-year plan. I think the other thing that I saw from Canada is this, like a little bit of, I don't want to say they're cocky, but they were very open about, we're playing, Gold Cup, we're preparing for, semifinals against Mexico. They were very open about, like, this is the biggest match we're going to play, and they didn't necessarily deliver either. They get knocked out by Haiti, and they didn't back up what they were saying, but they do want to be a major player in this region. And when I had an opportunity to interview Jonathan David, who I think is going to, in the next few seasons, he's going to be at a very big club. He's going to be at a big club, and he's going to be playing. And I think that'll be another discrepancy that will be looked at because Christian Pulisic, the success that he's had at such a young age, now he gets to one of the biggest clubs in the world. He's not playing, and he's going to have to fight through that. Jonathan David, a bit younger than him. And I think when he gets his chance, I don't think there will be any doubt that he's going to make a difference, playing in the Premier League or wherever that may be. So when I spoke with him, he's a big Barcelona fan. He would love to play for Barcelona. But he comes from, he's a very focused kid. He's a very good player. I think he's pretty versatile up in that top, playing in that front three. In Belgium, he has already led his team in scoring. As a teenager, I think his first season he finished with 14 goals, and he's hot right now too. And so there's a lot of promise in that Canadian side.
A lot of young talent coming through, and you get Alphonso Davies going to Bayern Munich. You've got David at Ghent. You've got a player like Marc-Anthony Kaye, I think he's coming into his own at LAFC. But on the U.S. side, you do have a few questions. You have guys going through into the Bundesliga and playing really well, but the Christian Pulisic situation, what's your take on his move to Chelsea and what's going on at the moment?
Yeah. We've been talking about this a lot in our Slack channel. Our team at the Athletic. Just the pressure that he kind of stepped in, the way that move was made. Was it? How many marketing dollars were there? Like how important was the fact that he's a young American player, arguably the best American player right now, and in a very Premier League friendly country, right? Where the ratings and the production value and the investment just continues to grow. And I truly believe that was part of it, and that was, it was kind of like those the add-ons, like, oh, and imagine if he plays well, we have all this working for us here in this country. The way that the Premier League is just consumed in the United States. So, but my personal opinion, and I don't have anything, like I have not spoken to anybody. I just think Frank Lampard wants him, let's just be blunt, to grow a pair. I think he's testing him. I think he really wants to see what kind of player he has, what kind of metal Christian Pulisic is made from, and what, does he have the right mentality to come to a Chelsea and not just be given something, because Chelsea, they're back in the Champions League. They struggle a little bit, but they're back in the Champions League. And I think the other thing, and this could just be bad timing for Christian, for years, Chelsea has been criticized for developing young English players and not giving them opportunities, and just loaning players
and now
all
they
over
have
the
to.
world. Yeah, and so now I think with what has probably not been said, and this is just my opinion, I think now you have a manager in Frank Lampard, a very proud Englishman, who I think, after coming from Derby County and playing young players and having success, I think he's probably coming in after, a revolving door of foreign managers at Chelsea and saying, you know what, I'm going to play the English players. I'm going to get this going in another direction. I'm going to play young players that are English. I'm going to give them an opportunity. He probably sees it as important for the development of the national team. And the other guys are going to have to earn their shot. And that includes Christian Pulisic. And so now Christian comes into a team where there are a lot of young English players that are good and that are making a difference, that are giving the opportunity. So that's my take. I think Frank Lampard, and listen, he played in the United States. He probably saw the culture here in this country, the way young players are brought up, to honestly, and it's a very entitled sort of, sport here in this country. I've spoken to Tony Annan about this, and he was adamant that, like, hey, the English kids are no more spoiled than American kids, but that is a reality. You don't have to always fight for opportunities here in soccer in this country. Sometimes it's just your checkbook and who and the connection. And I think Frank Lampard, the little time that he was here, maybe he saw that, and maybe he wants America. If he's going to take on an American player, he's going to make sure that they battle just like everyone else.
Okay, Jason, I'm at the fork in the road here. What direction should I go? Should I go with yesterday's question that we had that was really cool, or do we talk about this weekend?
Take yesterday's question, then we'll move to MLS.
Okay. Yesterday, we had a question, Felipe, that was posed. If you could add a young player from the past at that age, like a young so-and-so, and you could add him to Atlanta United right now as that young player, who would you add to have him develop in the Atlanta United system as that teenager from the past going forward? And we had a lot of cool answers yesterday.
The Atlanta United system. I'm sure you did get a lot of cool answers. I think, I'll probably be that guy, because I think the Atlanta United system is still developing. I think it's still a work in progress. So it's difficult to say, hey, I know that X player would just fit in and get better here. I honestly don't know that.
Yeah, think about it like an 18-year-old who is a first-team player, but young, like starting their first-year career.
And that could come into Atlanta United, step in and play?
Yeah, like my two thoughts were a young Frank Rijkaard coming in as a 6 or a young Michael Laudrup coming in as that transition piece who can play up top, can play out on the wing, can play as a 10?
Yeah. All right, so I'll give you two. One is like such a fantasy, but I will say a very young Fernando Redondo.
Ooh.
So a left-footed, strong central midfielder, a guy, a 6 basically in South America, a 5, and a guy that never wanted to share that position with anyone else. He was like, I will play alone as the 5, and he could maintain the central midfield. He could distribute. He could beat guys. His vision was uncanny. And when he was young, he was just a completely different type of player. There weren't players like him, and I think in general in MLS, and especially at Atlanta United, I think Atlanta United that's an area of need. I think Jason, you probably agree, is this like a 6. So that's one. My second would be like an 18, 19-year-old Robinho. And I would just throw him out there and let him play. Do what he did with Santos, young, early, when they were just crushing guys in Copa Libertadores with Diego. I think even who else was on that team? Was it Young? I don't think Young Neymar, but like they were stacked. Robinho at the time was a different type of player, and a player that I think there are a few of those in MLS, and I think Atlanta, would be great if they were one of those clubs that was like, yeah, we'll take on those guys that play outside of tactics, and you just face them, match them up with someone and let them create some magic. So those are my two.
Could you imagine if you took a pairing of a young Tino Asprilla with Joseph up top?
Oh man, Tino was my boy. Tino, when I was 15, I would wake up at 6 a.m. to watch Serie A just so I could watch Faustino Asprilla. Yeah, he's another one. He was electric. Tough to handle, just kind of ahead of his time as far as a striker goes. Could score from anywhere. Oh yeah, that would be tight.
Okay, yeah, because we had.
Go ahead, John.
I was just to say, we had folks suggesting yesterday a young Frank de Boer, a young Carlos Bocanegra, and Inigo Montoya this morning suggested a young Carlos Puyol.
Yeah, I think a young Bocanegra and de Boer are good shouts because, I agree that type of defender is still so rare in Major League Soccer. It's just so rare, and I'm interested to see how DP scouting and DP selection evolves in the future, because I think eventually teams they're going to go after DP defenders, guys that are not Virgil van Dijk level, but Virgil van Dijk difference makers, the type of guy that's like, we will build around a central defender that is a superstar, that put that pressure on him. That I see that as kind of an evolution of the DP. Like, who will be the team that will, throw down some serious money for that level of defender, and the type of defender, like you said, like that's very good on the ball, can distribute, can play out of the back, positionally aware, a good tackler, just kind of a next level defender.
I'll be fascinated to see where roster construction goes after this next CBA. I want to ask you just a basic question about what we learned from Atlanta United in Montreal. What was your biggest takeaway from that performance following up from the loss at Yankee Stadium?
Tactical sensibility, which is what I wrote about after the NYCFC match, because I saw a team in Montreal that was much more I don't want to say patient, but they looked a little bit more disciplined as far as just tactically what they wanted to do, considering that they were facing a team that was coming after them. Montreal had to win that game. They weren't going to sit back. I don't really think that they have the type of roster to do that regardless. And so I thought that was a test because, in my opinion, Atlanta United just played into the hands of New York City. FC at Yankee Stadium. And I understand, Atlanta is the type of team. Atlanta United is the type of team that wants to, be on the front foot. They want to impose themselves on every pitch around the league. At times they will press even away from Mercedes-Benz. But I just felt like after that New York City match and watching it, it just wasn't working. And I think the concern was that the adjustments that were made in the second half, it was just too little, too late. And so that has happened often, I feel, this season in games where they get a little bit too far down, that kind of intense front foot rabbit hole, and it's difficult to adjust against good teams in this league. I wrote about that. It reminded me of the very first match in Costa Rica, where we're coming off an off season where the narrative, not really narrative, I don't like to use that word, but both the team, the coach, and even Michael Parkhurst, they were very public about playing a little bit more, defensively aware, being conscious of the fact that, under Tata, they were put in difficult situations defensively. And then they go into that Costa Rica match and it's just like the same thing. They were just everyone was pushing forward. There was no cohesion, and, Herediano just ate them up because they had done their homework. And so I thought that's what it looked like in NYCFC. And against Montreal, there was a very evident, adjustment tactically, that they were going to keep the ball. They were going to be patient on the ball. Obviously, some players came in, some players came out that allowed that to happen. And I think it looked like, the NYCFC match, if that's considered a quote unquote final, well, then that's when you need to adjust. That's where your tactics and your personality as a team, you need to find the right balance. And so I think I heard you say, Jason, yesterday or 2 days ago, that the Montreal match looked like kind of a dress rehearsal for a playoff matchup where, gosh, the margin for error is just nil. It's nil. A knockout competition does not. There are no excuses they don't pardon any mistakes in that type of format, and so you have to be a little bit more conservative and pick your poison, pick your chances, and I thought that's what I saw in Montreal.
So we're going to have a lot of time to talk about MLS playoffs over this international break and getting ready for it. We're going to take the remainder of the time right now to geek out about the Maradona documentary.
There you go.
Oh, please! I can watch that on a loop.
I know. I'm probably going to watch it this afternoon. What was the scene? I mean, you know Diego, like I know Diego from his career, and we were both huge fans as kids. What was the scene that surprised you the most, or what was the thing you learned in it?
Well, first of all, yeah, I was 10 years old. I was 8 years old during the '86 World Cup. And my dad was a big, we're living in northern Indiana. It was so difficult to just watch soccer back then. And so my dad would climb on the roof and he put some crazy antenna on the roof in order to get a signal from Chicago or something. And we watched it, and I just, during that World Cup, I was already in love with Maradona. And as a 10-year-old, I had to basically be told by my parents, you cannot wear that shirt every day. But I would wear an old school Le Coq Sportif Argentina number 10 jersey to school every day. And I loved Diego. I loved everything about him. I loved Argentina back then. And so that going into watching this film, like I said yesterday, it was I relived so much of that. I remembered how much, I loved him, how much I was hurt when his career just just went off the cliff. But for me, what surprised me, and it's the opening scene. It's the opening scene. When driving to the press conference to be, unveiled as a new Napoli player, and essentially that first question from the journalist. They just go ahead and ask about hey, Napoli is just connected to the local mafia. Every month, all the money is moved through them, and it was. I think that was one of the things that, even though you may have thought well, of course it's Napoli, it was the '80s. Italy is not the only country that has had issues with that type of thing, with organized crime being part of the sport. But for that to be so open and such an issue and such a concern for a player like Maradona and a club like Napoli at the time, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was, that they had to address it and that it became an issue. So that was what had me, throughout the film, like, wow, that's a tough situation to be in.
The early training sessions at Napoli is footage I'd never seen, and I think the one that everybody knows from a Diego Maradona warm-up is the Live is Life one. That is one of the greatest 2 minutes of video that exists in the world's history. It was the one, I think it might have been his first training session with Napoli, or one of the very beginning ones when he first arrived, where he just casually, ball played to him, just passing back and forth with a teammate, pops it up and juggles
on his heel.
With his heel for 10 touches. Blew my mind watching that, the control he has.
There's a lot in the film. I mean, the fact that at 15 he had to support his entire family. Those things we forget, and it's just so uncommon in the U.S. for in this type of sport. And that still goes on around the world, and especially in South America. Kids that, it's all on them, as teenagers. If they either they make it and help out their family, or they don't, and they're back to where they started. I thought what I also felt was just so revealing. Anytime Maradona spoke in the film, like, I felt like I was like, really listening. But the one thing that I thought was really cool is how he talked about having to adjust his game when he got to Napoli. And I think that's something that we can all relate to, even in modern soccer, and especially here with Atlanta United and all the talk about Pitti. So, Pitti, South American Player of the Year, I'm not comparing him to Maradona, but as far as fame, he probably could at one point. Pitti was that famous in Argentina when he left. And, I think Maradona was already considered, he was almost there to being like the best player in the world when he left Barcelona. And listening to him say, he struggled a little bit. You could see the first highlights in that film are him, and Napoli struggling, and him probably trying to do too much. And he talks about how he had to find, that balance between, technique, speed, and the type of defending that he was facing in Italy, and how the fact that to him soccer is a game of, it's about fooling the defenders. It's about being quicker, mentally, and more intelligent, and anticipating things. And so that was great, because it's not just, even though he is still considered probably the best player, ever, he didn't just walk into Serie A and just start dominating.
No, it took time. It wasn't an easy transition, and then everything else started to happen. Everything else happened in his life. Highly recommended. Watch the documentary. I'm sure Felipe and I will be geeking out about it pretty much every time we watch it, because there's something new in it every time that you notice. We're not going to take more of your time, although I'd like to. I know you're a busy man. What are you working on over at The Athletic?
So we've got some things, a collaborative piece that I think all the MLS writers are working on, that we'll probably post tomorrow. I'm starting to think about just the New England matchup for Atlanta United, and what that's going to look like, and what the post data will look like, especially if this is a team that Atlanta United is going to face again. I think that is a big story. I think it's a huge game on Sunday for Atlanta United. Almost suddenly it's become that. And just the story around New England and what Bruce Arena has been able to do, and this isn't a team that's afraid to come into Mercedes-Benz. I really don't think so. I don't think they're going to be trying to impose themselves and dominate, but I don't think they're afraid of anybody. And if it becomes one of those things, even if Atlanta walks away with a 3-0 win, and then they the standings stay as is, it still sets up for such an intriguing rematch in the playoffs. And so I'm looking at that. I'm looking at those storylines, A couple more features outside of the Atlanta United universe that I've filed, so heads up on those as well.
Make sure you're following him, Felipe Carr, on Twitter. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Always, guys. Take care.
We're going to take a quick break, reset for hour number 2 right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, SDH, October 3rd. Thanks again to Felipe Cardenas for joining us and then John allowing us to geek out a little bit about the Maradona documentary.
I am as much a fan of quality documentary and storytelling as the next guy. And to hear the two of you geeking out over that kind of stuff, I thought it was a hoot. So you don't have to worry about doing that kind of stuff on my account.
What do we have on the Twitters from the folks listening?
Tafka is on a roll this morning.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And there isn't a whole lot of optimism in the timeline at the moment.
Oh, no. They're going all Willie Taggart, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Tafka says U.S. soccer doesn't recognize its shortcomings and doesn't fix its problems. Therefore, what would normally be wake-up calls for most are just shoulder shrugs to U.S. soccer.
Okay, but here's my question. What wake-up calls have happened for Greg Berhalter in his time? And that's the only thing I want to make clear. Was not qualifying for the World Cup, massive, unbelievable wake-up call. And that's what a lot of people put their hopes on when it's like, yeah, maybe if we just don't qualify, that'd be a good thing and it'd be a wake-up call and all these things would change. Well, no, it's not good when you don't qualify for the World Cup, no matter if that change happens or not, but change didn't happen. So what wake-up calls have happened on Greg Berhalter's watch? For me, there was a wake-up call with the friendlies prior to the Gold Cup, and I think that wake-up call was answered. I think the Gold Cup was better. It was smarter in the way the matches were approached. You got to the final. You accomplished the job. You're talking about 2018 World Cup qualifying where you finish 5th in the Hex. So the idea of U.S.-Mexico 1-2 or 2-1 or whichever way you're going to put them coming into qualifying for 2018. Let's go back to leaving Brazil in 2014 and where you would put the U.S. and Mexico. Pretty similar. Well, by 2018, that wasn't the case. Now I think you've reestablished that. I think the U.S. is the second best team in CONCACAF. Okay, that's progress. That's a step in the right direction. Now, like I said before the Gold Cup, and like I'm saying about CONCACAF Nations League, if the U.S. doesn't reach the final of these competitions, if they get knocked out by a Jamaica, by a Costa Rica, by a Panama, by a Honduras, that's a failure. And there's no spinning it in anything other than being a failure. If they lose to Mexico, it's not a failure right now to me because Mexico's better.
Yes. Bartimus Prime. The USMNT roster is not the future. 12 of the 26 are older than 26. 10 of the old players are MLSers. If the core of the team will be 29 to 31-year-old MLS players at Qatar 2022, we're screwed.
I agree with the idea behind that. However, you are finding that balance between results and building. Now, one key part of this, and this is where if you don't get something else right that is going to be a very big thing over the next 12 months, then this part becomes more of an issue that you're not playing more young players. You've got to qualify for the Olympics. You've got to get that competition for your U23 players. You've got to make that happen. The last two times with that not happening, it has had an impact on the U.S. program. 150 million%. It has to happen this time. That is a must. Because if you are able to play those U23 players in the Olympic qualifying tournament and in the Olympics and get those opportunities for them to be tested, cool. Then you're good. Then you're developing that side along with your U20s and along with getting results at the senior level. Okay, you can work with all that. But if you don't qualify for the Olympics and now you're not taking the opportunity to play young players in a game with Cuba, and maybe the second go-round, depending on where you go through these first two games, maybe you do go younger with the roster in November. But the Cuba match, you should be able to go very young, give players experience, and make progress. The Canada match in Toronto, I don't think that's the time. I think you got to get a result there. I think you need to get a win. Minimum, you need to get a draw. You got to get a result. That's not going to be easy. I don't want to see them sacrifice short-term results in official competition to play young players. You have to qualify for the Olympics. If you don't, then you've screwed the whole thing up. And I do think that if you can take the opportunity with the second Cuba match in the Cayman Islands, depending on where you're at that point, if you can go young with that roster, young with that lineup, young with that game day 18, good. That's where you need to be.
Joey Logan doesn't add to any optimism this morning, saying they're not even going to make it to Qatar.
Why? Why do you say that? That's the thing, is like, why would you say that? Who's going to qualify instead? Who should qualify instead is the better question. Nobody.
Yeah.
That's the thing here, is that the U.S. should qualify for the 2022 World Cup. The U.S. should have qualified for the 2018 World Cup. They didn't fail to qualify for 2018 because they weren't expected to. They failed. Coaches got fired. There were failures. The roster, you can like it or not, but the roster, the talent pool, is the second best in CONCACAF. I think you're lying to yourself, or you're giving into the negativity if you think Costa Rica, Jamaica, Panama, Honduras, Guatemala, so on and so forth, Canada, same. I think you're lying to yourself if you think their player pool is better than the United States. And if you have the second best player pool in CONCACAF, you should finish in the top 3 in the Hex and get that automatic spot. And at a minimum, if you don't, you better finish 4th if you have the second best player pool and get into the playoff. You should qualify. To say that you're not going to is a level of negativity that I think is based on what happened last time around and what U.S. Soccer is portraying, which is not a position of strength. And that's on the folks in Chicago. That's on the marketing. That's on not controlling the narrative, and that's in not regaining the narrative. There's a lot to that, and that part's all very valid. But talent-wise, yes, this team should qualify, and there shouldn't even be a question of that. And the fact that there is a real shame. They finished second in the Gold Cup. I mean, come on. They handled things pretty well in the Gold Cup. They should qualify for 2022.
And Bartimus's follow-up says he can handle losing to Mexico and Jamaica if it's a bunch of young, under 25 players. But we're losing with a bunch of guys who've been in the system for a while or are over the hill athletically.
I don't think you just go U25s against Mexico in the Gold Cup final.
No.
A friendly, different conversation, and that was a disappointing result. I agree. Jamaica, again, there's a difference for me between a competitive situation and a friendly. The friendly before the Gold Cup was still the Gold Cup roster preparing for the Gold Cup. And I think Berhalter did learn from that, thankfully, because it looked much better going forward. In friendlies and in opportunities where you can do it, I do agree with Bart. You need to bring young players through. That's why you can't have it both ways about Brendan Aronson being part of this. So you're bringing a young player through his first cap. That's good. I like Brendan Aronson's game. I think Brendan Aronson has a lot that he can bring to the national team pool. Is he a lockdown starter right now? No, I don't think he is. I think it's questionable on if he's a better player than Paxton Pomykal. I don't know if he necessarily is. I think they're a little different. I like Aronson's playmaking ability. I like his passing ability. I like his confidence. So you're bringing him through. That's good. You got to pick your spots to play them. And this group, you have 2 games with Cuba that you should be able to go young and give those players minutes and get a result in a competitive game. Friendlies, different conversation. And you should take more chances with them. The Mexico friendly, it's tough. I mean, it's a friendly, but it's not a friendly. It's a measuring stick. It's a tricky one. But other friendlies, you should be going with young players. And in competitive games with teams like Cuba, you should be going with younger players as much as you can. But I keep going back to that U23 thing. Like, you have to make the most of that. And that's where your young players should really shine. They have to. It's been a huge failure to not get there the last 2 times. And it has had an effect on the program. I think when you look at the players who have come through, you have a lot of questions about those players in that 21 to 28-year-old range. Guys who should have gotten experience at the last Olympics. That's got to change. You've got to qualify for that. And when you don't do it, you miss out on that opportunity for those guys to get those tests.
Daniel Price with a question about Brad Gazan. The likelihood, and this is a question, he says, what's the likelihood that Brad Gazan is wasting his time by going? I want him to start and show well, but I don't think Berhalter or the entire U.S. soccer community has any faith in him. They're pretty blind for whatever reason.
I don't know why Brad Gazan is looked at like he's not in contention to be the number 1. I have no idea why that's the case. I think it's very unfair. You're not going to turn it down when you're brought into that. You can't. I think it's Brad's dream to take this team to a World Cup and play in a World Cup, and I think he has that opportunity in front of him. He's got to do everything possible to change that narrative. I think he should have already changed the narrative with his performances here in Atlanta. I think he's been outstanding.
Yes.
But it hasn't for some reason, and he's going to have to do it in training camps, and he's going to have to do it when he gets opportunities, because I do think Brad Gazan could be the goalkeeper game 1 of the World Cup in 2022 for the U.S. I do think he has that ability. I think he has as much of a chance as anybody else. If Zach Steffen is anointed as the number 1, I think there's a lack of an opportunity to look at the competition. Steffen might end up being the guy, and he might be the guy in 2022. That Zach Steffen's an outstanding goalkeeper as well. But I think Brad is right there, and I think from a possession-oriented team, Brad has some advantages over Steffen in terms of his distribution, and that would really benefit this group, in my opinion.
Dan Murphy has a question for the research staff here at SDH.
Uh-oh.
Query for the crack staff. With all the knocks, injuries, and lack of fitness, what's the total number of full 90-plus minute matches where Barco, PT, and Joseph were all on the field at the same time? My guess is not more than 7.
I don't know if you got to 7. That they all played 90 in it? I know you didn't get to 7. Let's say they all started. That's maybe a more fair comparison. Because I think at the times that Barco was playing 90, Pitti wasn't. And at the times that Pitti was playing 90, Barco wasn't. So I don't think they've all played 90. I don't know if there's one game. But all started at the same time. I'm going to go back to Ezequiel Barco and go back to the 10 starts he's had in 2019. He started the Open Cup semifinal against Orlando. He started is that the league match against Orlando? I believe it is. That he started in Portland, and Barco was subbed. Started against New York City at home, August 11th. I'm looking back now. It was the league match against Orlando that he started. He did start the Open Cup match as well. Started against LA Galaxy, but was subbed in the 62nd minute. Then you're going back to his last start with the Atlanta was Kansas City on the road. One of the best performances. Started against Colorado. Started against Dallas. Started against New England. Started at Columbus. And that's it in league play. The only games that Barco's played 90 in league play are the loss at home to Dallas, the win on the road in Kansas City, and the win in Orlando on August 23rd. That's the only 3 times he's played 90 minutes. It's been a huge issue.
Yes.
It's been a gigantic issue. When you look at how good Barco has been in matches for Atlanta, you look at how good he was in that run at New England, 2 goals, man of the match. Probably the best Atlanta performance in the loss to Dallas at home. I would say man of the match or second man of the match in the win in Kansas City. That's 3 out of 4 games where he was a absolute stud. And then he went to the U20 World Cup, scored 2 goals against South Africa, and was one of the best performers for Argentina in that tournament.
Yep.
That was a pretty amazing run in April, May, and June for Ezequiel Barco, and he's been injured and has missed a ton of time since. Since then, he's played in 8-9 games in all competitions for Atlanta United.
Yeah.
It's really had a huge impact.
Dan follows up by saying that MLS is set up to where it's difficult to win without your DPs playing well and contributing. Most other clubs would have missed the playoffs entirely. Hopefully they can change the narrative and drive us on a championship run.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, just because you're putting so much, emphasis on those guys. So it's very difficult if they're not contributing in big ways. It's impressive that Atlanta's gotten to this point, and I think it's part of the credit that you got to give to Frank DeBoer for finding ways to alter this team at different points, and sometimes because he had options and sometimes because he didn't have options, but to drag them along and keep getting the results to put them in the spot that they're in. I really feel like Atlanta United is not talked about as one of the best teams in the league this season when the numbers say that they are. They have the opportunity, if they win on Sunday, to be the number 3 team in points for the season. That's pretty impressive. That would put you as the best ever defending champion in MLS history in terms of points the following season. Not just going back into the playoffs and going back and winning it, because that's only happened 3 times. But in points, that would make you the best. It'd make you the best in the post-shootout era. It would tie for the best in the shootout era, which is a whole different point system. But you're still going to equal that if you get a win on Sunday. And you have 2 trophies to add to the case. The Open Cup trophy is a big one because it's not easy to go through what this team has to play Sunday, your 44th match of the calendar year, and accomplish what you have. It's difficult. You add the injuries in, that just increases the degree of difficulty. So when you ask, and it's been asked before, and I'm sure it will be asked throughout the rest of the year, has it been a successful year? I think you cannot answer no. The degree of success can be argued. The level of success is still yet to be determined as well, but I think it's impossible to say that 2019 has been a bad year for Atlanta United or a less than successful year for Atlanta United, not with what they've accomplished.
Because what was the stat? There was a stat that I stumbled across, and I'm trying to remember the phraseology correct, that only 6 teams in the history of MLS have won something in the following year.
It might be 6. There's only 3 who have repeated as MLS Cup champions. Houston in the mid-2000s, LA Galaxy in the early teens at 11 and 12, and then DC United in the first 2 years. So for MLS Cup, it's only happened 3 times. I think you've had a few who have won the Open Cup and then won MLS Cup the following year, or vice versa. But it's not easy to do because, and I think it's harder to do, and I'd have to go back to look to see which ones won the Open Cup and then won MLS Cup. That's not the same degree of difficulty because when you win MLS Cup, especially the way the calendar's set up now, you win MLS Cup, you start your season earlier than anybody else the next year. You're going to be playing more games than anybody else because of CONCACAF. And to do what Atlanta did, you win MLS Cup, you go into CONCACAF, and then that following year, when you're already playing more games because of CONCACAF, you go through the gauntlet of winning the Open Cup. You're adding so many games. I mean, 44th game of the year on Sunday.
Yeah.
You're going to play 45 minimum. That's going to be a good 5+ more than anyone else in the league. It's wild that you've played that many minutes with the injuries you've had and be able to get the results that you've gotten. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yes. And just, without your quote-unquote first-choice lineup, having gone through all the injuries, all of the juggling that Frank DeBoer and the staff have had to do, you've had folks playing in positions they haven't in quite some time. You've had folks playing in positions that they just haven't, and they've had to learn on the fly. And you've used soccer IQ when it comes to Justin Meram being played as a wingback. And to have all of these athletes doing what they've done across this season where they've played more matches than anybody else, they played 450 minutes minimum, more than everybody by the time we're getting to the postseason. I think it's been a tremendous accomplishment. I still count it as a 2-trophy year. heading into the playoffs. But, for me, this year has been a success. You're back in hemispheric competitions. You're back challenging where you were last year, wanting to better yourself there in that theater. So for me, the season has been a success, even before we're through with the regular season.
When you look back at Open Cup winners, I know at least two of the teams that won trophies in back-to-back years won the Open Cup first and then won MLS Cup the next year. Sporting Kansas City won the Open Cup in 12, won MLS Cup in 13. LA Galaxy won the Open Cup in 2001 and then won MLS Cup in 2002. That's, like I said, a different degree of difficulty because it's when you win MLS Cup, and in those days especially, when you won MLS Cup and then went into CONCACAF and then went through a gauntlet of Open Cup the next year and all the games that it takes to get to the final and to win it, that's more games, more stuff to do in the next calendar year. It's very difficult. So it's not easy to do what Atlanta United's done. It's a year that has been really impressive for a lot of different reasons, and it's not done yet. I mean, you've got the chance to beat New England in a game at home where you will be favored. You should win that. That gets you the third best record for the season. That gets you, if you beat NYC and LAFC gets knocked off somewhere in the Western Conference, which is very possible, then you're hosting MLS Cup again. You get locked into the number 2 spot. You're going to play New England again, which is the team that will be the weakest of the playoff field in the Eastern Conference. That's who you would want to see in Game 1. And most importantly, it would get you playing at home in the Eastern Conference semifinal. Guaranteed if you win your first game, because then you don't have to go to Philadelphia in a knockout game. They would have to come here if they win and get to that point. Much better situation to be in. It's a huge game on Sunday to take what's been a successful year and set it up for an easier road through the postseason. Look, you're not going to win the Eastern Conference. You're not going to get the easiest road that you could have had. That's gone. You have to get the easiest road that you can get now, and that is being at home for as long as you can and playing the weaker opponent in the first round. You want to get yourself set up to keep this season going and keep building upon what you've done in 2019. Let's take a break, come back, more from Twitter. Also, there's a few little news nuggets to drop in and discuss as well. We'll do that right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Dan Murphy questioned the Crack Soccer Down Here research staff, and they were busy during the break, and there has not been a match in league play in 2019 where Ezequiel Barco, Pity Martinez, and Joseph Martinez all played 90. Hasn't happened.
I think that deserves, as Chris Meyer says, that deserves a wow.
I mean, I don't know if it deserves a wow. It just adds
wild
to that. No, I mean, it's just how it's gone. I mean, Barco's only played 93 times in league play. So it's a short list to check. And against Dallas, Pity Martinez didn't start. Against Kansas City, you had a 3-0 lead. Pity and Joseph both subbed out late in that one. And then in Orlando, you changed up. Pity Martinez came out in the second half late, 78th minute. You brought on Tito Villalba. So that's those are your 3 starts for Barco, and you did not get a 90 minutes trio with Barco, Pity, and Joseph at any point in 2019 in league play.
Vine City FC says it seemed like Tata's teams used more quote-end-quote rotation than FDB.
No.
Miggy, Barco, Villalba would drift left.
Oh, okay.
Right center,
sorry.
On the field, I guess.
Rotation in the field. Yeah, I thought we were talking rotation. Sorry, Vine City, about the roster, because that was something that Tata people had questions about. It was always the same group who started. Once he had a core, that was it. On the field, I don't know if I'd agree with that either, because you go back to the Tata Martino most traditional setup of the 4-2-3-1. In that setup, when Barco was out wide, he stayed out wide but would dribble inside sometimes, and Miguel Almiron was always going to drift towards the left. That was pretty much the default. Joseph stayed in his role. He didn't drop in the same way as now. Now, I think when you've seen this group play, and I'm going to go, I mean, again, there's not a ton of data here, but the 3-4-3 that we've seen in the second half of the season, which if you don't want to call it a 3-4-3, I'm okay with that. Call it a 3-4-2-1, call it a 3-5-2, but Barco's in as the 10 and Pity's dropping underneath Joseph, so whatever you want to call it. When you've had that trio in the second half of the season, I think it's been really fluid, because Pity will pop up on the right, left, or center. Joseph will drop deep. Barco will dribble into space wherever. I thought on Sunday in Montreal, when it was Barco and Pity together, it was very fluid. So I don't think it's like a design. Like, I don't think Tata was looking for those things to happen that Vine City's talking about. Miguel Almiron's natural inclination is to drift left. He was going to drift left out of the middle, especially when he was on the ball, because that was his instinct. Barco is going to drive on the dribble and move the defense around on the dribble, generally going across the field. Whether he's on the left or the right to start, he's going to dribble across. I think the biggest change in 2019 is Joseph dropping into the midfield and creating different rotations and different overlaps and different spacing than we saw in the Tata Martino days. They just had different ways of looking at the game, too, in the sense that Tata Martino and his way of controlling matches and controlling opponents was the threat of the transition and the fast transition and playing vertically to create that transition. For Atlanta United now, under Frank de Boer, more than anything, you want to control it via possession. And whether that's fast, medium, or slow, doesn't matter. You want to control it with possession. And those are two shades of the same thing, but different. Tata Martino wanted possession, but it wasn't number one priority. Frank de Boer wants to get forward and play in the other half, but it's not the number one priority because he wants to do it in an organized way. But there's similarities between them. It's not completely one is the opposite of the other.
Let's see, where else? Chris Kilroy Loved your chat with Felipe about the Maradona doc on HBO. Kilroy says that he was watching with his 13-year-old son who plays last night, and when he was doing the back of the ankle, my son was like, oh, okay, like that's next level stuff. Great work, all.
That was the one that I'd never seen it before, so just casually juggling with the back heel, just, no big deal, just sitting there doing it. That's not easy to do, y'all. So go back and watch that one a few times because, wow, that's just one of those bits of footage. I mean, this documentary, 500 hours of Maradona footage from the Naples days was, I guess, in a vault somewhere, and they narrowed it down to what you see. It's amazing. There would have been some documentary that would have come out from Maradona's people back in the day, but it didn't happen, and now it has in a very different light, which is made for an amazing couple hours. So go check it out. It's on HBO On Demand. HBO will be showing it quite a bit. It lived up to the hype, and trust me, for me, there was a lot of hype when I heard about this. There was a lot to live up to, and it 100% delivered.
Shiva is looking forward to listening later today, but her #Random Thursday thought is that she'll be very, very heartbroken for Atlanta if they can't find a way to keep Julian Gressel next year.
It's going to be tough. That kind of leads us into the expansion priority draft that is happening on Sunday. You guys might remember this when it happened in late 2016 for Atlanta and Minnesota. It's where you start to get into what 2020 can look like. Julian Gressel's not going to go in an expansion draft, but this is just kind of that awakening to, all right, yeah, 2019, you're still wrapping it up, but you got to think about 2020 and what's going to happen. And with Atlanta United's roster, you're going to have guys who are at the end of a contract. You're going to have guys who have outperformed their current contract. You're going to have guys who are looking for raises. You're going to have a salary cap to deal with. You're going to have allocation money, how much you have, how you have it, if it's TAM, if it's GAM. You're going to have difficulties in retaining everyone, if you wanted to, from the current roster who is out of contract, because you're going to run out of room under the cap and allocation money. It's very difficult in this league, and it's why it's structured the way it is, to keep a group together for a very long period of time, because this league is about parity. Julian Gressel has come in as a number 8 pick in a super draft, where he was projected coming into the super draft to go anywhere from 12 to 18. He went 8. He's been better than a number 8 pick. He's going to need more money. I mean, he's outperformed the deal he's on. That's what happens in sports. Are you going to have the room to do it? Because it's not just in a vacuum that it's one player, one decision. You've got a cap. You've got allocation money to deal with. You've got other players who are going to be in similar situations, whether they're developed in the league, whether they are from overseas, whether they have interest from other clubs. You're going to have a lot of puzzle pieces to fit together. Now, part of it is the 2 expansion teams coming in, whether you're talking about the 12 players you protect for the expansion draft, or whether it's these expansion teams with a lot of allocation money to work with and a mostly blank slate in how they want to fill their roster. There are going to be players in the league that they say, you know what, we would like to get that player, and you know what, we can give them either more money than they're getting or a bigger role than they have currently. And that's where expansion teams do well. We're going to find out who gets the first pick in the expansion draft on Sunday. So this is all part of Decision Day. The pregame show that MLS will be doing, you can watch it starting at 3 o'clock on MLSsoccer.com, the MLS app, on their Twitter, on their Facebook, on their YouTube. They're going to have the priority draft there. So Miami and Nashville will have a coin flip to see who goes first. Then it is the draft of drafts. Welcome to MLS, where teams will draft 5 from 5 different roster building mechanisms. The first one is the expansion draft. The next one is the super draft. The third one is the allocation ranking order, being number 1 there. Then the final two, Atlanta and Minnesota, didn't even use these. It didn't come into play. The penultimate position in the MLS reentry and end-of-year waiver order, and the other one is the penultimate position in the Discovery player ranking. So, whatever, throw those in the toss-up. If you get the number one pick, you're going to get two of the three things the number one spot you want. If you don't get the number one spot, you're getting the number two spot. So it's not like you're going to miss completely out. So, how did that play out in 2016 going into the 2017 year for Atlanta and Minnesota? Atlanta won the toss. They took the number one pick in the expansion draft. They picked Donnie Toya. You're going to say, wait a minute, I don't remember him. Well, they traded that pick to Orlando for the number 8 pick in the super draft that they used on Julian Gressel. I'd say that worked out.
Yeah.
Minnesota took the number 1 pick in the super draft. They took Abu Danladi. It hasn't been a complete miss, but maybe not number 1 pick status. Atlanta had the number 2 pick. They picked Miles Robinson. I'd say that's worked out.
Yes.
Allocation ranking order. Atlanta took the number 1 pick there. They used that to sign Brad Gazan. I'd say that's worked out.
Yep.
Minnesota had the number 2 pick. They traded it and brought in a bunch of allocation money, which works out. So you're not going to fail if you lose the coin toss. But I think whoever wins the coin toss will do what Atlanta did. I think they'll take the number 1 pick in the expansion draft to either take a player that they like or flip it. And then I think they'll take the number 1 pick in the allocation order. Whoever loses the coin toss will end up getting the number 1 pick in the super draft. And the player that has so far been mentioned, now he's got to sign a Generation Adidas contract, and that comes up at the end of the college season, is Daryl Dike. You'll remember the last name from a former MLS player, former Nigerian forward, Bright Dike. Daryl Dike is a 6'2 sophomore forward at Virginia, one of the top freshmen in the ACC last year, having a good year this year as well. If he comes out of college early, if he signs that Generation Adidas deal, there's talk he could be the number 1 pick in the super draft. And that's a Abu Danladi type of pick. That would be a young player. He's a little younger, I think, than Danladi was, maybe a year younger, that you could develop and grow into a top forward in this league. It is possible. He's got that pedigree. That could work out. So I think whoever wins the coin toss takes expansion draft, and then whoever comes in second will take the super draft. I don't think that flip-flops. I think the order is pretty well set in which ones are the most important.
And when that gets determined for me, then I know that there are going to be a lot of folks who are going to sit there and pour over rosters. And I know that Atlanta United fans are going to pour over their roster. It's like, okay, who do we expose and who do we look at and all this kind of stuff. And that's when the palace intrigue starts.
You won't be able to truly do it because you won't know all the contract situations, and you won't know when somebody's left unprotected, everyone will freak out. And then you'll realize that either they were unprotected because they were out of contract, or they were here on a loan that no one else could have actually picked them up and used that player. They couldn't trigger the loan themselves. Stuff like that you just don't know. It's very, very difficult to truly predict this stuff because there's so many unknowns in the process.
Let's see what else is going on Daniel Price with a question for this morning. And I already know the answer, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the question anyway.
Okay.
If DeBoer wins MLS Cup this year, is he Coach of the Year? That's 4 cups in a year, first year as manager, etc.
No, because the Coach of the Year voting is regular season. And he won't win that over Bob Bradley or Matias Almeida or maybe Adrian Heath. Bradley's the pretty much stone-cold lock in this. Pretty much. Maybe, depending on how many voters have already turned in their ballot, maybe if they lose on Sunday or draw on Sunday and they don't get the record, maybe it's not as much of a lock. I'm going to assume that most people have already filled out their ballots and they're already submitted, and Bradley wins it. And if he doesn't, Almeida would be next for me.
Yes.
And that's
for
not
me,
a
it's
knock on the
Bradley.
job that Frank's done. I think it's just a year where there's a bunch of different possibilities, and if Bradley sets the record, then I think it has to be him.
Yep. We are officially caught up on the Twitter, sir. Do you want to go to break and come back, or do news and notes?
Let's finish up with some news and notes. We haven't talked about it this week, but VAR, there could be some changes. Could is the key word. The Sports Podcasting Network, it's over at sportspodcastingnetwork.com. They have an update from the media availability that Howard Webb gave in Montreal, and I wish I'd been able to sit in on that. Howard Webb, the GM of PRO, the Professional Referees Organization, he gave a presentation about pro and about refereeing in MLS, and VAR was obviously a big topic. Howard Webb did tell the media that was on hand that with the growth of the league and the rising travel costs, there is an idea about having a central VAR room. There is an idea about having one location, have everything feed into it. Yes. Thank you. Because it makes so much sense. And the cost is part of the reason that it would make sense. I mean, it's just like you're sending VARs and AVARs, and AVARs, the assistant VARs, are generally localized, but not always. The VARs are not. So you're sending them to every stadium. You're making sure that every stadium has the capabilities of doing this, where it would be a lot easier and a lot more cost-effective to have a central location. One thing that the Sports Podcasting Network said was that this, having a central location, could create the possibility of a tier system in the decision-making process, where the supervisor present could intervene if a situation goes wrong, not unlike the National Hockey League. I don't know what the National Hockey League replay situation is. John, do you have any knowledge of how that's different?
I mean, it's a centralized location in Toronto, and usually what they will do is they're proactive about it. If they see something that they think needs to be reviewed, they notify the arena.
But VAR does that. I mean, that's the same process.
Yeah. So I don't know how different NHL VAR is, because it's more outbound from the centralized location to sit there and say, hey, let's take a peek at something. As opposed to... We
know that. Like, that would be the same thing, but it's this tier system about... Do you know how that works? If you don't, it's fine. Like I'm not up on my NHL one. I don't think the NBA has that set up, where it's like there's referees assigned to the game, and there's somebody supervising that can say, hey, you're wrong on that. That needs to be looked at again because you missed this part.
No, I'm trying to parse it out in my head, but I don't know how this tier system plays out, because I've always thought that it was outbound from the NHL to sit there and alert the arena, and then the arena alerts the lead official on the ice to sit there and say, hey, take a peek at this, as opposed to the
tier
official
system is in the centralized location before it goes, before a decision is made.
That's the first I've heard of a tiered system before it gets out of the building. I've just always thought that everybody in the building was like, yeah, okay, take a peek, buzz the arena, let them look at it, as opposed to a gatekeeper before it goes out.
I don't know. We'll find out, because I'm not sure exactly how that sets up. What the other thing it would do is, if you have a centralized location, is you'd have much more opportunities for training, for seminars, for communication, for end of the night, going back through the video replays from the evening and saying, yeah, we should have handled this one better, or we could have handled this differently, or we could have handled this quicker. The evaluation process would be much, much better. So go check out sportspodcastingnetwork.com if you want more detail. But I love that they're at least thinking about this idea about a centralized location.
Yeah, I've always liked the idea of a centralized location, and then that way everybody's looking at it under one roof and there aren't any hiccups along the way, and you take the emotion and the atmosphere away from the arena that it's in, and then you can look at it detached. And for me, that's been the key in all of this, is to make sure that you can take as much of the emotion out of it, so you're not hearing people yelling one thing or another. It's not showing up on a matrix board that, you're influenced by one way or the other. The more detached and centralized, the more I'm for it.
All right, our boy Johannes Schneider has been doing the work this week, and we have a new potential record to keep in mind about Sunday. If Atlanta United wins on Sunday, that would put them to 127 points earned in a 2-year span, which would be the most in a 2-year span in Major League Soccer history. The LA Galaxy currently have that mark, 126 points in 2010 and 2011. The Galaxy are also third on the list, 1998 and 1999. Atlanta, this would get them to the best overall 2-year run in MLS history if they win on Sunday. Craziness.
Well, if it wasn't a craziness stat, then Joe Cool wouldn't be on top of it and figuring it all out for us.
It's true. It's what he does. He's the man. He is the master of the media notes in Major League Soccer. Him and his crack staff. He's got a much better crack staff than SDH does. I can tell you that much.
I think we need to loan him and his staff out for our research department.
No, we would need to borrow his staff because they're not our research department. We can't loan anybody like that. We need to get them to be our research department. We need to get them to do a second job. But yes. I don't know if they have time for that because they do so much research. Let's get into the MLS Nuggets ahead of Decision Day, and there'll be plenty more tomorrow as lots of things come out today. Nicholas Ladero, he trained fully with Seattle yesterday. He's missed 3 straight games with a back injury. He's not there. Seattle's not going anywhere in the postseason. He's there. They're an MLS Cup contender. I think it's as simple as that. Alejandro Bedoya, Philadelphia. He is out with a low-grade quad strain, according to Joe Tanzi, one of the reporters who follows the Philadelphia Union. He's expected to be back for the first playoff match, but quad strains are not exactly easy to deal with and to diagnose and to put time frames on. So keep an eye on Bedoya when you start to get into the postseason for Philadelphia. He is not going to play this weekend. Now, off the field stuff, Fernando Adi filed a grievance with the MLS Players Association alleging poor treatment at FC Cincinnati. And the allegations, the MLSPA confirmed that they're working with Adi, but they didn't wish to comment on this complaint right now. Adi said that the new management team that came in mid-season made it clear that he's not part of the group, that he should be moved on. He's been training. The team has said he's not fit enough to play. Adi says that he is fit enough to play. There's been talk about his contract, and this is according to The Athletic. Laurel Thaler of The Athletic said that according to a source with knowledge of the contract, a bonus would have kicked in had Adi played 60% of Cincinnati's games in all competitions this season, which means he would have needed to make 8 more appearances than the 14 he currently has.
Yeah.
When he returned to training with the team September 3rd, there were 6 matches left, so that wouldn't have been enough. But Adi says he could have returned and started playing earlier. And a source close to the situation said, quote, they could do that with any player, and that seems wrong, talking about the bonus and the contract and et cetera, et cetera. Don't know the situation. Adi saying he could have come back sooner. The club saying he couldn't. It's a bad look.
Yes.
If it was a closer bit on the bonus situation, it seems like it'd be a stronger case. But the whole thing about was he injured, was he not injured, where was it, how was it, that's the bigger question here to me than the very specific situation with the bonus.
Because you know that No, and the player and his representatives are going to sit there, and they're going to sit there and say, yeah, he was healthy at X, Y, and Z point, but then the team wouldn't let him or wasn't in a position to, didn't want to, whatever. And then the team's going to sit there and say, well, we have our information and our physio staff says that Adi wasn't responding to X, Y, or Z, wasn't hitting our marks when it came to coming back healthy. So as always for me, truth is always somewhere in the middle when it comes to something like this, but you know that it's going to be just the opposite sides of all this stuff. So what the team is would say and what Adi's reps are saying, yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
I think the parts that are going to be difficult about it is he's had a lot of injuries this season, but he also missed time after getting suspended due to, I believe in Ohio, it would be an operating a vehicle while impaired, OVI charge. Clocked at 102 miles an hour in a 65 mile an hour zone. Blood alcohol count was 0.124, twice the legal limit, nearly twice the legal limit. He missed. That happened on March 31st. He was reinstated on April 24th and made his return on the field on May 4th. This was coming after an ankle injury in the third match of the season. He had a hamstring injury midway through the year. He had a calf injury in August, and that's the one that he was saying he could have come back sooner, but he wasn't brought back sooner. Ron Jans told reporters after the September 12th match that Adi had another setback with his calf on the other leg, but he was seen training, and he has not appeared on the injury report since the September 18th game with Atlanta. It's a mess all the way around.
Yes.
It has not worked out. It was a big move from Cincinnati to go get Fernando Adi last season from Portland. It hasn't worked out, period, for a variety of reasons. And it needs to move on. I don't know how the actual complaint's going to get sorted out. We'll just have to wait and see. But Fernando Adi, there's no way back for him in Cincinnati. He's going to have to move on, and he's got a lot to bounce back from. I don't know what the market is for Fernando Adi at the moment around the league or elsewhere. We'll have to just wait and see what happens with Adi going into the 2020 season. About 2020, Matias Almeida was asked about rumors around the Monterrey job. He didn't shut him down. He said that, you know, it was something he loves to see, that he was mentioned in such a high regard in Mexico. He really enjoyed his time in Liga MX, didn't shut down the rumors, didn't say that he had been talking with San Jose about 2020 yet. He said he wanted to finish the 2019 season first. They have a chance to get into the postseason, and I still think that if they get into the postseason, it makes the move to Monterrey far more difficult.
Yes.
And far less likely. If they get knocked out on Sunday, it opens up a door that the Earthquakes are going to have to fight to try to keep closed.
Yep, right there with you. And it's been a blast so far to see Almeida in San Jose, and for San Jose to want to bring in someone like Matias Almeida and to have Almeida embrace the idea of being in MLS and bring his style and bring the joy that he wants to have his players playing with. And it's been a fun watch. And to your point, straight up, if they're in the playoffs, going to make it tougher. If they're not, then yeah, it's going to be, you know, that Monterrey is probably going to throw not just the kitchen sink, but probably half of the kitchen if they can to try to get Almeida to come down there to take over next season.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. If he's got playoff matches to prepare for, I just don't know if Monterrey can afford to wait it out. I think they'll move on if he makes the postseason. If they don't, then those talks can happen starting next week, and that's going to be fascinating because Monterrey can offer pretty much anything that Matias Almeida might want. I mean, they can pretty much open the door to anything he might want, any types of players he might want. They're going to be the team that's probably going to have the best roster in Mexico. They spend the most money, wide open, and that's a tough gig to turn down. A really difficult thing to walk away from if you're Almeida. I don't know. It's a huge game on a lot of different levels for the San Jose Earthquakes this weekend as they try to get into the postseason. We'll get you set for everything Decision Day related tomorrow. A ton to talk about around the league. The Western Conference playoff teams are not determined yet. The positioning is not determined beyond the number 1. In the East, you got the 7 that are in, but 2 through 7 positioning up for grabs all the way across the board. We'll get you set for all of that on tomorrow's show. It's 9 o'clock, usual time. We'll have our usual suspects, Mike Conti and Doug Robertson, on the show in the second hour to get us ready for Atlanta and New England specifically. Lots and lots and lots and lots to dig into as Decision Day happens. I think it's the greatest Decision Day that MLS has had ahead of it. I really think you're going to have so many twists and turns in what the playoff matchups will be.
And I'll go ahead and give you 22 hours to think about it. But when Mike comes on, so technically 23, just how you guys anticipate calling the match in front of you with everything else going on around you and what that adventure is going to be like.
I mean, we did it last year with, Atlanta had a chance to win the conference, set the record for best season ever in regular season points. And then when that was out the door, then you're looking at, well, all right, now what's the matchup's going to look like? Oh, it's going to be NYC? Oh, okay. And just looking at the rest of the playoff picture, it's a wild experience because you've got all the games going on at the same time. Kickoffs will be 4:25, so keep that in mind. We're on the air at 3:30, so we'll have plenty of room to get the table set for you on radio. But everything's happening at the same time. They'll hold the second half kicks, and barring something crazy that happens somewhere, if there's a lightning delay or whatever, they'll hold the second half kicks. They'll all go at the same time. Head on a swivel, every screen you can have in front of you. That's what the booth is going to look like. I will probably have, I'm preparing at the moment to have a laptop, a Chromebook, the monitor behind us in the booth, and maybe a game on my phone if I need to. Now, the one above, I can't use that one. I might have a game on my phone, or that's going to be social media to keep up with everything going on, probably the latter. It's going to be nuts. But Atlanta can take care of whatever it wants to take care of by winning. You're second. You lock in the New England match in the postseason. That's the one you want. That's the weakest of the opponents. And you lock in the number 3 spot overall, which if you beat NYC or they get beat ahead of you, and if LAFC gets knocked out in the West, you're hosting MLS Cup. It's the best thing that is left on the table for you. You get it by winning over the Revolution on Sunday. That's job one. The rest of it will be entertaining to follow, but you don't want to have to start looking over your shoulder. Is it Toronto? Is it the Red Bulls? Is it still New England? What about Philadelphia? Are they struggling against NYC? Can we still get number 2? You don't want that. You want to win, take care of business yourself.
Take care of business. Like the old the Elvis necklace that had the words TCB with the lightning bolt on it. TCB, yes. Taking care of business.
Or Bachman Turner Overdrive. Didn't they do taking care of business?
2 minutes and 48 seconds. I'm trying to remember my my DJ days when you had to get to the top of the hour. But yeah, it was BTO that did that song.
That's what I thought. Your On This Day birthdays on the musical world. Stevie Ray Vaughan. That's a good one.
Strong.
Pride and Joy makes my all-time greatest hits mixtape every time around. One of my all-time favorite songs, period.
Texas Flood.
Tommy Lee of Motley Crue, born on this day in 1962. Favorite Motley Crue song?
Wasn't really a Crue guy.
Oh, man. I knew that was coming.
I'm more of an AOR guy than I was a hard rock. Although, was Heather Locklear married to Tommy Lee?
At one time, yes.
Yeah, that would be the reason that I paid attention to Motley Crue, would because of Heather Locklear.
Name a Motley Crue song. Not your favorite, just name one.
Well, Girls, Girls, Girls. Hello.
Okay, you got that one. Good. Kickstart My Heart would have been the correct answer on best Motley Crue song, in my opinion.
Understood. Yeah.
Gwen Stefani, born on this day in 1969.
I'm Just a Girl. Yeah.
Better solo career or with No Doubt? Which one do you like better?
I'm not really a No Doubt or a Gwen Stefani person.
Ay, Dios mío. Favorite song Gwen Stefani has been involved in?
You know, you're not gonna twist my arm there. That's gonna be a blank answer there.
Name
sir.
a song outside of Just a Girl that Gwen Stefani has been involved in.
Can't quite go there, sir.
You can't think of another. You don't have another one? Like there's just not another song.
I'm sure
that
I've
you
got
know
a
that she's
No
involved
Doubt
in?
CD buried somewhere, but it's been so long since I've listened.
Sunday Morning by No Doubt would be their best song in my opinion, and an underrated one would be Simple Kind of Life. No Doubt's great, one of my all-time favorites, and her work with No Doubt is better than her solo career in my opinion.
Yeah.
Although Holla Back Girl was a pretty ridiculous, huge, massive hit for her.
Yeah,
on the solo side.
understood. Yeah, Holla Back Girl, I understand its place, but if I'm scanning channels on my satellite radio, I'm not going to stop.
On the soccer side of things, born on this day in 1981, Zlatan Ibrahimovic.
Zlatan. Welcome to Zlatan.
We'll see if he can
has never been the same.
Score enough goals in Los Angeles to make up for a defense that gave up 4 goals to the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Oh, plus 900.
And on this day in 1984, it was the final match of the original North American Soccer League. The Chicago Sting defeated the Toronto Blizzard 3-2 to win the championship. It was a best-of-3 series. The Sting won it in 2 straight. That was at Toronto's Varsity Stadium, and Blizzard fans ran on the field, and they couldn't do the trophy presentation on the field. They had to do it in the Sting locker room.
Sweet. Karl-Heinz Granitza.
Yes. So the Chicago Fire moving back to Soldier Field, that was one of the Chicago Sting's many homes. They played at Comiskey Park. They played at Wrigley Field as well. The talk at one point was a rebrand. If the Chicago Fire rebranded as the Chicago Sting, would that be a good thing in your opinion?
No, I mean the branding is already there for the Fire, and to me it's an established part of MLS. As much as I would enjoy the flashback, I think that the Chicago Fire are the Chicago Fire, and just let them be.
I agree. I think the Sting would be the only other suitable branding to go with. I don't think they could get the rights to it. I think it's actually owned by somebody who at one point was talking about doing a lower division team under the Sting name, but that kind of fizzled out. So, yeah, it's the only other way to make things work, but I wouldn't do it. I think Chicago Fire is a strong enough brand on its own. I wouldn't change it. We'll see what they do.
Jared is maintaining that Don't Speak is another one for Gwen Stefani.
Don't Speak was one of their biggest hits for sure, and Don't Speak was a massive, huge, gigantic song. I think he's just trying to help you out since you don't know any No Doubt or
can't immediately recall.
No,
Gwen
you don't
Stefani
know. It's okay.
No Doubt.
It's okay. You're not down. It's okay. It's all right.
I'm not down. No, I look. I will stipulate that I'm not as down as a lot of the other cool people.
Sunday Morning was the best one, but excuse me, Mr. Spiderweb's Don't Speak was gigantic.
Yes.
God, there's just so many.
Tell me what you're thinking.
New was a good one. That was from a movie soundtrack. I was a huge No Doubt fan, and her solo career's been great too. She took some turns in her solo career that I did not expect, but yeah, I'm a little disappointed you couldn't come up with anything. It's okay. It happens. It's all good. It's all good.
This will be the first time that this happened?
No, it's not at all. Just means that next time we're driving to an Atlanta United 2 match, I might need to go away from the 80s on 8 and maybe get you into the 90s on 9.
Okay, well then that means Wednesday.
Exactly. It will be the finale at the Fraction for the 2s in 2019. It's been a fun time calling those games. We'll have that next week.
Yes.
It's going to be a fun time for Decision Day on Sunday. And we will be in the Gulch ahead of that for our tailgate show presented by Appolinsky & Associates. Looks
noon.
like 12:30. We'll finalize all that, let you know tomorrow. We will see you in the Gulch. We'll see you on the SDH app tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, for our next show. Much plot, y'all.
Much plot, y'all.